They appeared on a Thursday morning, their ships emerging from what looked like tears in the fabric of space itself. The Volari vessels weren't the metallic constructions of human science fiction. They were living things, massive organic structures that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns against the dark canvas of space. Dr. Julia Nash was in the middle of a quantum entanglement experiment at CERN when every screen in the facility suddenly switched to the same feed. A live satellite view of the alien armada positioning itself in Earth orbit. As she stared at the extraordinary sight, her researcher's mind was already cataloging details. The way the ships moved in perfect synchronization, the rhythmic pulses of light that seemed to flow between them, the organic curves of their bioengineered hulls. Dr. Nash, her assistant Thomas burst into the lab, tablet in hand. The UN Security Council is requesting your presence immediately. They're assembling every leading scientist they can find. Julia ran her fingers through her short gray hair, a nervous habit she'd developed over 20 years of quantum physics research. Why me? I study quantum mechanics, not extraterrestrial biology. Because you wrote that paper last year about potential biological quantum computing systems, Thomas replied, already helping her gather her things. And right now, those ships up there look an awful lot like living computers. The next 12 hours were a blur of emergency meetings, hasty analyses, and mounting tension. The Volari, as they called themselves, made their first transmission exactly 6 hours after their arrival. Their ambassador, a being that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a circuit board, appeared on screens worldwide. People of Earth, it announced in perfect English, its body pulsing with patterns of light that matched its speech. We are the Volari Collective. We have observed your species for some time, and we have determined that you require guidance. Your technological development has reached a critical point, but your social evolution lags behind. We offer you a choice. Accept integration into our collective, or face immediate technological regression. You have 72 hours to decide. In the UN emergency session, Julia found herself seated next to Dr. Raj Patel, a leading expert in biological computing. As various world leaders argued about appropriate responses, Julia couldn't take her eyes off the data streaming in from every observatory and sensor array on Earth. Something's odd about their energy signatures, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Raj leaned over. You noticed it too. The quantum fluctuations. Julia nodded, pulling up more data on her tablet. Their entire technology seems to be based on quantum biological systems. But look at these patterns. They're maintaining quantum coherence at a massive scale. That should be impossible. Unless, Raj's eyes widened, unless they're using some sort of biological quantum amplification system. Julia felt a familiar excitement building. The same feeling she got when she was on the verge of a breakthrough in her research. And if they're using biological quantum amplification, then they're vulnerable to quantum decoherence. Raj finished. As the politicians continued their heated debate about whether to fight or surrender, Julia was already running calculations in her head. The Volari's technology was incredibly advanced, yes, but it was also incredibly delicate. Their entire system relied on maintaining perfect quantum coherence across massive biological structures. We don't need weapons, she whispered to Raj. We need noise. The world leaders were still arguing when Julia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. All eyes turned to her as she walked to the center of the chamber. She wasn't a politician or a general, but she understood something fundamental about the universe. Even the most complex systems could be disrupted by the simplest mechanisms. I know how we can fight back, she announced. But I'll need every quantum lab, every biotech facility, and every sound engineer on Earth. Because we're going to turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The Volari have given Earth 72 hours to surrender. They didn't realize they'd given humanity exactly the time it needed to devise their downfall. As Julia looked around the room at the confused faces of Earth's leaders, she allowed herself a small smile. The aliens thought they were dealing with a primitive species, but they were about to learn an important lesson about human ingenuity. The next 3 days would change everything, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. And it would all begin with understanding the one thing the Volari never expected. Sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't a gun or a bomb, but a precisely calculated whisper. The underground facility beneath CERN wasn't listed on any official blueprints. As Julia descended in the elevator alongside Raj, she couldn't help but wonder how many other secret installations like this existed around the world. The doors opened to reveal a vast chamber filled with hastily assembled equipment and dozens of the world's brightest minds. Dr. Nash, a woman with wild red hair and an army of tattoos, waved from across the room. "Over here." "That's Dr. Kira Wong," Raj explained as they walked over. "She's the best acoustic engineer in the Asia-Pacific region. If anyone can help us weaponize sound waves, it's her." Kira was surrounded by complex arrays of speakers and monitoring equipment. "I've been analyzing the Volari's bioquantum signatures," she said without preamble. "They're using something like quantum entanglement to maintain their neural network across their entire fleet. But there's a catch." Julia leaned in to examine the waveform displays. "The biological component." "Exactly." Kira pulled up a 3D model of what they'd learned about Volari biology. Their ships aren't just vessels. They're extensions of their own nervous systems. The quantum coherence that makes their technology so advanced. It's maintained through organic crystals that form the backbone of their neural network. "And organic crystals can be disrupted," Raj added, excitement building in his voice. "Just like how a soprano can shatter a wine glass with the right frequency." "But on a quantum level," Julia finished. She felt the pieces clicking into place. "We don't just need the right frequency. We need to create quantum interference patterns that will cascade through their entire network." The next 48 hours were a blur of calculations, simulations, and failed attempts. They worked in shifts, fueled by coffee and the desperate knowledge that humanity's future hung in the balance. The Volari, meanwhile, seemed content to wait, their ships pulsing with that same steady bioluminescent rhythm. It was during her third straight hour of staring at quantum interference patterns that Julia noticed something strange. "Kira," she called out, "can you show me the acoustic analysis of the Volari's communication signals again?" Kira pulled up the data. The waveforms danced across the screen, complex, but with an underlying pattern that had been nagging at Julia's subconscious. "There," she pointed. "Their quantum coherence isn't perfect. There are micro-fluctuations, like they're constantly having to correct for environmental interference." "Of course," Raj breathed. "They evolved in deep space. Their systems aren't designed to handle Earth's natural electromagnetic noise. And if we can amplify that noise in just the right way." Kira was already adjusting her equipment. Julia felt a surge of hope. "We don't need to overpower them. We just need to push them past their ability to maintain quantum coherence." The next challenge was delivery. They couldn't just blast sound waves at the Volari ships. The vacuum of space would prevent traditional acoustic transmission. But Julia had another idea. "Their communications," she explained to the assembled team. "They're reaching out to every electronic device on Earth to broadcast their messages. That means there's a direct quantum link between their network and our technology. We can use their own communication channels as a carrier wave," Kira realized. "Hide our interference pattern inside their broadcasts." "Like a quantum Trojan horse," Raj added. The final hours were a race against time. While the world's governments made a show of debating the Volari's ultimatum, the team beneath CERN worked to perfect their weapon. It wasn't a conventional weapon at all, more like a precisely tuned quantum virus, designed to propagate through the Volari's own neural network and disrupt their biological quantum coherence. As the 72-hour deadline approached, Julia looked at the simple device they'd created, little more than a modified quantum antenna connected to Kira's acoustic generation system. It seemed almost absurd that humanity's best hope against an advanced alien civilization rested on something that looked like it had been cobbled together from spare parts. But that was humanity's greatest strength, wasn't it? The ability to take disparate pieces of knowledge, quantum physics, acoustics, biology, and combine them in ways no one had ever imagined before. "It's time," Julia announced, checking her watch. The Volari would be making their final broadcast soon, demanding Earth's answer. They would get one, but not the kind they were expecting. As the team made their final preparations, Julia thought about the irony of it all. The Volari had come to Earth believing they needed to guide humanity's development. Instead, they were about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating a species that had survived and thrived precisely because of its ability to think outside conventional boundaries. "Everyone ready?" she asked, her hand hovering over the activation switch. Around her, dozens of the brightest minds on Earth held their breath. The Volari's final broadcast was beginning. It was now or never. The Volari's final message began exactly as scheduled, their bioluminescent ambassador appearing on screens worldwide. Julia watched the quantum signatures spike on their monitoring equipment as the alien network connected to Earth's communication infrastructure. "People of Earth," the ambassador's voice resonated through the underground facility. "Your time for deliberation has ended. What is your answer?" Julia nodded to Kira, who began the initialization sequence. Their quantum interference pattern would piggyback on the Volari's own broadcast signal, using their neural network as a delivery system. It was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its potential consequences. They had one shot at this. If they failed, humanity would face technological regression at best, extinction at worst. "The signal is piggybacking successfully," Raj reported, his eyes fixed on the quantum coherence monitors. "Their network is accepting it as normal background noise." On screens across the facility, they watched the ambassador continue its prepared speech. "We have observed your responses these past 3 days. Your nations remain divided, your leaders unable to reach consensus. This only confirms our assessment that your species requires." The ambassador flickered. Just for a moment, but it was enough to make Julia's heart race. "Quantum disruption at 2%, Kira announced. "It's working." The ambassador's form wavered again, more noticeably this time. Its bioluminescent patterns became erratic, pulsing in irregular rhythms. What is this?" The usually smooth voice took on a discordant quality. "Disruption at 15%, Raj called out. "The cascade effect is beginning." Above them, in orbit, the massive Volari ships began to show signs of distress. Their perfectly synchronized movements became jerky, erratic. The beautiful patterns of light that had flowed across their organic hulls turned chaotic. What have you done?" The ambassador's image was breaking apart now, its form dissolving into random patterns of light and shadow. "This is impossible. Your technology is primitive. You cannot." "Disruption at 40%. Kira's voice was triumphant. "The quantum cascade is spreading through their entire network." Julia watched in fascination as their simple interference pattern multiplied exponentially through the Volari's neural network, creating a cascade of quantum decoherence that their biological systems couldn't handle. It was like introducing a single wrong note into a perfect symphony, then watching that discord multiply until the entire orchestra collapsed into chaos. The ambassador's final broadcast evolved into visual static and discordant sounds before cutting out entirely. On their monitors, they could see the Volari ships losing cohesion, their organic structures unable to maintain stability without the quantum coherence that governed their biological computers. "They're retreating," someone shouted, pointing to the orbital feeds. The massive ships were pulling back, their movements panicked and uncoordinated. Several smaller vessels had already disappeared into the same spatial tiers they'd emerged from. But Julia's elation was short-lived. "Something's wrong," she announced, studying the quantum readings. "The cascade effect. It's not stopping." "What do you mean?" Raj asked, rushing to her station. Look at these patterns. Julia pointed to the chaotic quantum signatures still propagating through space. The disruption isn't just affecting the Volare ships. It's creating some kind of quantum feedback loop in the fabric of space-time itself. Kira's eyes widened as she analyzed the data. The Volare's quantum network, it wasn't just connecting their ships. It was somehow integrated with their method of faster-than-light travel. And we just introduced chaos into that system. Julia finished grimly. Above them, the last of the Volare ships were desperately attempting to escape, but their spatial tiers were becoming unstable, collapsing in bursts of quantum energy that lit up Earth's atmosphere like aurora borealis. The facility erupted into frantic activity as they tried to understand the full implications of what they'd done. They'd saved Earth, yes, but at what cost? Had they just inadvertently destabilized the very mechanism that allowed for faster-than-light travel? And if so, what would that mean for humanity's future among the stars? As Julia watched the final Volare ship disappear into an increasingly unstable spatial tier, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of humanity's interaction with advanced alien civilizations. It was just the beginning. They'd proven themselves capable of not just defending against superior technology, but of fundamentally changing the rules of engagement. The quantum cascade continued to ripple through space, its effects still unknown. Humanity had won its first interstellar conflict, but the victory had opened up more questions than answers. As the facility's sensors continued to record the aftermath of their desperate gambit, Julia realized they'd done more than just repel an invasion. They'd announced humanity's presence to the galaxy in a way that couldn't be ignored. And somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of space, other civilizations would be watching, learning, and perhaps fearing what this supposedly primitive species was capable of. 1 week after the Volare retreat, the underground facility had transformed from a desperate last stand into the center of humanity's new space defense initiative. Julia stood before a wall of monitors displaying data from every major telescope and sensor array on Earth, all focused on the strange phenomena their quantum cascade had unleashed. "The distortions are still spreading," Raj announced, bringing up a new set of readings. "We're detecting quantum instabilities in a sphere roughly 2 light-years in diameter around Earth, and it's growing." "Like ripples in a pond," Kira added, "except we're dealing with ripples in the quantum fabric of space itself." Julia studied the patterns, her concern growing. The quantum cascade they'd triggered hadn't just disrupted the Volare's biological technology. It had fundamentally altered the way space-time behaved in an ever-expanding region around Earth. They'd effectively created a zone where faster-than-light travel became unpredictable, if not impossible. Dr. Nash, a young physicist, burst into the room, tablet in hand. "We're picking up something new. Multiple signals, coming from just beyond the distortion zone." The main display shifted to show dozens of energy signatures, distinctly artificial, but unlike anything they'd seen from the Volare. Julia felt her pulse quicken as she realized what they were seeing. Other alien civilizations, gathering at the edge of Earth's newly created defensive barrier. "They're watching us," she murmured, "studying what we did. Can you blame them?" A new voice joined the conversation. Admiral Helena Rodriguez, recently appointed head of Earth's Unified Space Defense Command, strode into the room. In less than 3 days, a supposedly primitive species defeated one of the most advanced civilizations in known space and accidentally created a weapon that changes the fundamental laws of physics. Julia had been working closely with the Admiral over the past week, trying to understand the full implications of their defense system. "Any signals from the observers?" she asked. "Nothing direct," Rodriguez replied. "But our xenolinguists have been intercepting their communications with each other. Want to guess what they're calling us?" "I'm afraid to ask." "The Void Makers." Rodriguez's expression was grim. "Apparently, what we did to the Volare has never been seen before. We didn't just drive them away. We created a dead zone in space where their form of faster-than-light travel doesn't work anymore." "That's not entirely accurate," Kira interjected, pulling up new data. The space isn't dead, it's evolving. Look at these quantum signatures. The distortion we created is stabilizing into something new, something different. Julia leaned in to examine the readings. Kira was right. The quantum chaos they'd unleashed was settling into patterns they'd never seen before. It was as if they'd accidentally created a new set of physical laws in the space around Earth. Dr. Nash, Admiral Rodriguez's voice was serious. I need to know. Can other civilizations use this against us? Could someone else create another cascade effect? Julia shook her head slowly. I don't think so. What we did only worked because we used the Volari's own quantum network against them. This, she gestured at the displays showing the distortion zone. This was an unintended consequence. We couldn't replicate it if we tried. And that's exactly what terrifies them, Raj added. We didn't just defeat an advanced alien species, we accidentally changed the rules of the universe while doing it. A new alert caught their attention. One of the observing ships had launched a small probe toward the edge of the distortion zone. They watched in fascination as it approached the boundary. They're testing it, Julia realized, trying to understand what we created. The probe entered the distortion zone and immediately began transmitting data unlike anything they'd seen before. The quantum readings were extraordinary, suggesting possibilities that made Julia's scientific mind race with potential applications. Look at these energy patterns, she pointed to specific readings. The probe isn't just passing through the distortion, it's interacting with it in ways that suggest, well, if I'm reading this correctly, we might have accidentally discovered a completely new way to manipulate spacetime. Admiral Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Are you saying we didn't just create a defensive barrier? We might have stumbled onto a new form of space travel. More than that, Julia's excitement was building as she analyzed the probe's data. The quantum patterns we're seeing, they're stable, reproducible. We didn't just break the old rules of physics, we wrote new ones. As if to emphasize her point, the probe suddenly accelerated in a way that defied their understanding of physics, leaving behind a trail of quantum distortions that pulsed with new possibilities. I need to make some calls, Rodriguez announced, already heading for the door. The UN Security Council needs to hear this immediately. Julia barely noticed the Admiral's departure, her attention fixed on the data streaming in from the probe. They'd set out to defend Earth from an alien invasion and ended up discovering something that could revolutionize humanity's understanding of the universe. In the space of a week, humanity had gone from facing technological regression to standing on the brink of discoveries that could reshape their future among the stars. And somewhere out there, beyond the quantum barrier they'd created, other civilizations were watching, waiting, and wondering what this unpredictable species would do next. 1 month after the Volari incident, Julia stood in a newly constructed observation dome atop Mount Palomar, watching the quantum aurora that had become a permanent fixture in Earth's night sky. The shimmering curtains of light weren't just beautiful, they were a constant reminder of how humanity had rewritten the laws of physics in their desperate bid for survival. The Galactic convention is ready to begin, Kira announced, joining her at the window. Representatives from 27 different civilizations, all gathered just beyond our quantum barrier. Never thought I'd see the day when Earth would host an interstellar diplomatic conference. Even if it is technically a long-distance call, Raj added, working at a console nearby. The quantum distortion zone still prevented direct contact, forcing them to communicate through specially designed probes that could navigate the altered spacetime around Earth. The main display activated, showing a diverse array of alien beings, some biological, some mechanical, some defying easy classification. Each had come to understand what humanity had accidentally created, and more importantly, what it meant for the future of interstellar civilization. People of Earth, the first speaker began, its form shifting like liquid mercury. We have spent the past month studying the phenomenon you created. What you call the quantum cascade effect has done more than create a defensive barrier around your world. It has opened up possibilities that our civilizations never imagined. Julia stepped forward to address the gathering. We've been studying it too. The quantum barrier doesn't just prevent traditional faster-than-light travel, it creates new ways to manipulate space-time itself, ways that even the Volari hadn't discovered. Indeed, another representative spoke, this one appearing as a complex pattern of light and shadow. Our scientists have confirmed that the properties of your quantum barrier could revolutionize everything from space travel to energy production. You have, without intending to, created something that could advance all our civilizations. Admiral Rodriguez, standing beside Julia, took over. Then let's discuss how we can work together. Earth doesn't want to keep this discovery to ourselves. We believe the quantum barrier and its properties should be studied and developed cooperatively. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Representatives from civilizations far more advanced than Earth began offering exchanges of knowledge and technology. But it wasn't charity. They recognized that humanity, despite its relative youth as a spacefaring species, had demonstrated an innovative thinking that could benefit them all. There's something else you should know, Julia interjected, bringing up the latest data from their quantum monitoring stations. The barrier isn't just stable, it's evolving. The new physics we created is beginning to generate phenomena we never expected. She displayed readings showing strange new particles forming in the barrier, exotic matter that shouldn't exist but somehow did. The quantum cascade hadn't just changed the rules of spacetime, it had opened the door to an entirely new understanding of the universe itself. Which is why we're proposing the establishment of the Quantum Frontier Initiative, Rodriguez announced, a cooperative effort between all our civilizations to study and develop these discoveries. Earth will serve as the primary research site, but all findings will be shared openly. The alien representatives buzzed with excitement. This was unprecedented. A young species not only creating a revolutionary scientific discovery, but offering to share it freely with the galaxy at large. The Volari believed we needed guidance to advance. Julia addressed the gathering. They thought our technological development had outpaced our social evolution. But they missed something fundamental about humanity. Our greatest advances have always come from cooperation, from sharing knowledge and working together. As if to emphasize her point, new data began streaming in from the probes studying the barrier. The quantum aurora overhead intensified, its patterns shifting to reveal possibilities that even their most advanced sensors struggle to comprehend. We stand at a crossroads, Julia continued. Not just humanity, but all of us. What we accidentally created here could change everything. Space travel, energy, our very understanding of physics. But it will take all of us working together to unlock its full potential. The response was unanimous. One by one, the representatives pledged their support to the initiative. Earth, the youngest member of the galactic community, had become the centerpiece of the greatest cooperative scientific endeavor in known space. Later, as the conference concluded, Julia returned to the window. The quantum aurora painted the sky in impossible colors, a testament to humanity's accidental reshaping of the universe. But it was more than that now. It was a symbol of hope, of what could be achieved when different civilizations came together in pursuit of knowledge. You know what's funny? Kira joined her at the window. The Volari came here thinking they needed to guide our development. Instead, we ended up showing the galaxy a whole new way forward. Julia smiled, watching as research vessels from a dozen different civilizations maneuvered carefully through the quantum barrier, each studying the new physics that humanity had unwittingly unleashed. They had set out to defend Earth, and ended up changing the course of galactic history. As the quantum aurora danced overhead, Julia couldn't help but wonder what other discoveries awaited them. Humanity had proven itself not just capable of surviving among the stars, but of leading the way into a new era of scientific exploration and cooperation. The universe, it seemed, had much more to teach them, and this time, they wouldn't be learning alone.